overwhelming support by every board and commission that took a position on the project. And while a national credit crunch, which has affected nearly every avenue of commerce, has slowed the project a little, we are still confident that it will move forward later this year. With respect to Mr. Belfie's representations that somehow the developer misrepresented his dealings with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, nothing could be further from the truth. I think all of you have heard directly from Mr. Chappelle and have heard directly from representations of staff that the conversations with HUD have been extensive, that the end of those conversations leads to an invitation to apply for the mortgage insurance that Mr. Belfie referred to. They do not solicit an application until they conclude their due diligence. An application occurs at the end of the process, not at the beginning of the process. So Mr. Chappelle and Strathmore Development, I think, have been completely candid about where they are in the process, and they have provided evidence to staff, which we have shared with you, of some of the exchanges between Strathmore and HUD. I also want to just make clear that Mr. Belfie and the public know that the properties on Evergreen that will eventually be the site of a parking ramp have been acquired by the Downtown Development Authority. Options have been exercised. The DDA is legally bound to close on those properties. The DDA has paid for those properties heretofore with its own resources, which are derived from a tax on downtown properties, a tax which the DDA has the authority to levy, not by the general tax revenues of the city of East Lansing. And so it is our full expectation that the contractual obligation the DDA has made to close on these properties will occur as scheduled later this spring, and that funds from the management of those properties in the interim through rents received and through other DDA revenues will make sure that taxpayer dollars are not needed to subsidize that acquisition. Again, I regret that I had to comment to clarify those misrepresentations, but it's exactly what they were, misrepresentations, and for the benefit of those watching at home, I felt it important to clarify those. Thank you.
Hello. We've just watched a segment of a TV broadcast on East Lansing City Cable TV, a council meeting, where Mr. Ted Staton attempts to, as he says, clear up misrepresentations that were made by me. And in doing so, he creates this whole series of misrepresentations. So we'll kind of run through those a little bit here. First issue, of course, has to deal with the HUD loan guarantee. This is the reported HUD loan guarantee for City Center II. Now, keep in mind that video was from April of 2009. It's now, of course, June and July of 2010. And over a year ago, they were talking about this loan guarantee, and I FOIA'd the documents from HUD, and there were no documents from HUD. Mr. Staton talks about extensive correspondence between HUD and Strathmore. There was zero correspondence between HUD and Strathmore. There was one letter from Capmark, the purported lender for this particular project, stating that they had a conversation with Strathmore officials and they were about to proceed with their due diligence and that the application would be sent in within a matter of months. Well, it's obviously been over a year and there still is no more documents other than that one. But I did FOIA the documents recently because there was other statements about this loan guarantee in the spring. And I did receive some documentation from HUD. Someone, and we have to presume it was Ted Staton, But someone prevailed upon the governor, Jennifer Granholm, and Michigan's 2 senators, Carl Levin and Debbie Stabenow, and others, to send letters to Sean Donovan, the Secretary of HUD in Washington, D.C., urging Secretary Donovan to support this application for City Center II. Well, obviously, there is no application. And that was, again, part of the documentation that was sent to me. HUD has no documents at all, other than that one cap-marked letter. That's been, probably a year and a half now. One letter. So when Mr. Staton says there's been extensive correspondence that they shared with the council, it is just flat out lie. There's no other way to explain what he said other than the fact that he was just misleading the public and the council. I'm not exactly sure how to characterize this latest political ploy, if you will, but it's just more misrepresentations that have been taken from the local level and now they're at the national level. The other issue that Mr. Staton mentions in his presentation that I presented to the council earlier that evening was the whole question of the buildings on Evergreen that were purchased in order to make way for the parking garage to service the City Center II project. Mr. Staton said that the DDA had purchased those properties. Remember, this is April 2009. Well, that was just a flat-out lie. They did have an option to purchase at least one of the properties, perhaps 2, but they did not purchase any of those properties. And the second part that is very disturbing, he says that the DDA had purchased those buildings with their own funds. Well, that's another bald-faced lie. First of all, the DDA never purchased those buildings. Never. To this day, even though their name is on the title, those buildings were purchased by the City of East Lansing, floated on anticipation notes to raise the $5.5 million that was used to make those purchases. I guess we can presume that they'll find the money somewhere. We can just hope that it's not general obligation funds that come out of our taxpayer dollars. The City of East Lansing is in a horrible economic crisis, just like every place else, the state of Michigan, the federal government, etc. And for them to go around borrowing $5.5 million with the anticipation that someday this project is going to get off the ground is just very, very irresponsible. And I fought very hard, as well as others, to keep the city from making this very, very serious mistake. It's a very, very serious error and putting our taxpayer dollars at risk. And quite frankly, we failed. And I think we failed in part because the public had been misled about this issue since day one. So don't take my word for it. Go to publicresponse.com. The documents that I mentioned here are all posted there. And you can take a look and make up your own mind on exactly who was making misrepresentations to whom about what. I stand by my integrity. I have the documents. They're posted on PR. And please go look at them. Thank you very much.